We often think that transformation follows when we make the right choice. Should I stay? Should I leave? Should I set the boundary? Should I let it go? But often transformation doesn't happen when we make the right choice, but when we stop trying to. Because we think that we need the answer, but what we really need is the capacity to stay with the question. So, today I want to talk about one of Carl Jung's most profound ideas, the transcendent function, and how it relates to Buddhism, alchemy, somatics, and even how I practice astrology. A lot of my clients come to me and they'll say things like, Jazz, I've been sitting with this question for a really long time. I've been sitting with this situation for a really long time. And when I ask them, what does sitting with it look like? They often point to doing things like, well, I thought about if I make this decision, what I would have to do and where it would take me. And if I made this decision, what I have to do and where it take me. Or I talked about it with this friend and I've really thought this through. And we've moved into analysis and we've moved into solving, not sitting. And this is because we've never really been taught how to sit with questions, sitting with the tension of not knowing and trusting that that is actually where the transformation happens, which is exactly why I want to talk about this, because I want us to understand that transformation happens in the space that we have not been taught how to enter. Now, as I talk about this, you're going to notice that across different frameworks over thousands of years, there have been similar ideas. Before we get into Carl Jung's transcendent function, I want to talk a little bit about what the goal of depth psychology or Jungian psychology even is, which is psychic wholeness, what we call individuation, the reconciling of the unconscious and the conscious to bring about a sense of unique and complete authenticity. It's not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming more fully who you are. On the path to individuation or psychic wholeness, the way that we can actually move toward this is through the transcendent function. The transcendent function here is essentially when there are two oppositions. We can talk about the conscious and the unconscious. And often what we are doing is yo-yoing back and forth between this and that, right? Acting unconsciously, acting consciously, judging the other side. And as soon as we jump into one, we immediately reject the other. And what Carl Jung found in his work was that by being able to actually sit with the two tensions without jumping to solve it, a third psychic function arises, which is called the transcendent function, which is an integration of these two things, but becomes its whole new symbol, a whole new image. In alchemy, this is really the metaphorical philosopher's stone. This is the magnum opus, the great work that we are moving toward, which is wholeness, reconciling dualities, moving beyond the dualistic mind and experiencing wholeness. The transcendent function is what actually allows us to go beyond what we see and what we don't see, to go beyond the opposites that bind us day to day, the decisions that we feel like we have to make that feel like we're always sacrificing something. And the thing here is that we have not been taught how to stay with the questions. Now, Carl Jung talks about a lot of different ways to do this. His favorite way is either dream work or active imagination. Now, these are kind of specific to Jungian psychology, but what I have found, the tool that I come back to again and again and again, is actually somatic work, because this transcendent function is actually very much related to the idea of nervous system capacity, being able to tolerate more and more discomfort in the nervous system, because the way that the nervous system moves is that it will always resort back to the familiar because the familiar feels safe to the brain. We've been here before. We can predict a better outcome. We can predict the outcome better than places that we haven't gone before. So our job essentially becomes to teach the nervous system that it's safe enough to stay with unpleasant sensations without jumping to the familiar. So there may be something that happens to you often where you're like, I don't know why I keep reacting like this, right? Maybe there's a goal that you want to move toward, but as soon as you sit down to do it, your body is like, let's go. We got to do something else. Oh, I forgot about the dishes. Oh, we got to do the laundry. And you keep wondering, why do I keep doing this? This is the unconscious at play here. But what's happening in the nervous system is when you sit down to do this thing, your body is signaling fear because there's a lot of things that maybe come up around that. Maybe it's a fear of visibility, fear of failure, fear of judgment. But you don't have enough time to think about it because the nervous system is responding before you even have conscious awareness. And so immediately your body says not safe, and you'll find any excuse to get up from that feeling of discomfort. So it might be doing the dishes, it might be grabbing your phone, it might be getting hungry. When you increase your nervous system capacity, you can sit with the discomfort. Now, when we go back to the transcendent function and holding two tensions without jumping to one or the other, you have to be able to tolerate the discomfort of the uncertainty of not choosing either side. So we see how these two things are really related here. And as we even talk about alchemy and how the magnum opus of alchemy is really to reconcile these dualities and integrate them into a whole new understanding. And even in Buddhism, there are a lot of things that I can associate here, but the first thing that comes up to me is one of the four Brahma Viharas, which is equanimity, which translates into there in the middleness. There in the middleness. And it's often about balance. So it's a little bit different than integration, but similar concepts, similar idea, because equanimity is about not pushing away the present moment, going beyond mindfulness of just noticing what's happening, but also not pushing it away and accepting the present moment exactly as it is. And it takes quite a bit of capacity. So, as you are thinking about how do I actually transform these patterns in my life that feel like they're constantly happening again and again, no matter how many times I bring them to conscious awareness, the problem is not that you haven't found the right answer. The problem is that you haven't been able to sit with the question long enough. So, this is really what I help my clients do all the time. And right now, I'm helping them do it through mapping the shadow, which is essentially my framework of astrology, human design, depth psychology, and somatic shadow work to help you process these very things, to help you be able to have a conversation with the unconscious without running to solve it. And this actually requires a healthy sense of ego. Now, this is something I plan on talking about in another video because oftentimes in the spiritual world, in the healing world, we are told to demonize the ego. But without a strong ego to mediate between the unconscious and the conscious, we have a very difficult time having enough capacity to stay with the unresolved tension. So building a healthy ego is actually foundational to this work. And it's actually why I use astrology because of its symbolic nature. I go deeper into this in mapping the shadow, of course, as well. The way that this impacts the way that I even practice astrology day to day is because when we look at the birth chart, we recognize that it is a circle, and a circle is whole. It represents wholeness. And within that circle, there are 12 signs made up of 6 pairs. And each house sits in opposition to another house. Each sign sits in opposition to another sign. And this is why, if you're familiar with my work, I always talk about these things as oppositions. When we're talking about Aries, we can't neglect Libra. To understand Aries, we must deeply understand Libra. To understand Taurus, we must deeply understand Scorpio. So when I'm working with people and their astrology charts, and they bring to me a certain issue, I'm not just looking at that sign. I'm not just looking at that house. That is why your life has been so difficult, because you keep going back and forth between one side. And as soon as you jump into one side, you immediately reject the other side, and it gets louder in the subconscious, and then you start self-sabotaging. What the birth chart becomes is a beautiful representation of tension. And these tensions are not for us to solve, but are here to be consciously held by us. And that is how we become authentically ourselves. And the birth chart shows us the ingredients, the recipe that is more likely to aid you in the process of individuation. Somebody who has one birth chart might do better with these techniques. Somebody with another birth chart might do better with these techniques. One day I was sitting in my therapist's office and I just remember thinking, man, how amazing would it be if she knew that I was a Sagittarius moon? If she knew that I was a human design projector? How she could maybe think about what tools to use with me because of that. And that's really what we're doing here. Now, I'm not a therapist, and this doesn't have to be therapy. It can just be a place where you learn how to relate to your conscious and unconscious mind. This is a way of stepping into a new relationship with yourself and therefore a new relationship with all of life. Because the more that you move toward psychic wholeness and individuation, the more that your perception of the world around you and the energetic field between you and others has to transform. It is natural law. It has to transform. When you transform, everything around you must as well. So often we look to the external world to help us solve our problems, but really, life is asking us to be able to hold more and more of ourselves and eventually to express it, which is why I have offerings at different levels. I have offerings of doing shadow work. I have offerings of the inner revolution immersion when you're ready to actually bring that transformation into your life. And then I have offerings like creative rewilding and another one that's coming up, Safe, Seen, Sovereign, which both of those are really about expression, creative expression, being of service, taking all that transformation and really bringing it as a service, as an offer to the rest of the world. Because it's really the same process at different points of your life and what level of transformation you're working at then. So, the transcendent function is a massive tool that we can use when we are stuck in these situations where we believe that there must be a right choice. The logical mind sees in dualities. It says, okay, this is the correct answer or this. And when we live in that world, when we are constantly going back and forth, we never feel a sense of resoluteness in our bodies. We are constantly feeling discomfort in the uncertainty. When we move into the transcendent function, this third field that naturally arises when we are able to hold these two tensions, it's not that uncertainty disappears, it's that we don't feel the discomfort of uncertainty in the same way. And from that space, conscious choice emerges. Possibilities that were not available when you were only thinking with your conscious mind of the two realms, a third realm of possibilities emerges. This is the beautiful thing about this work. I'd love to hear what associations you're making to this work and what part of this stood out the most for you. When you think about sitting with a question or a problem or a struggle that you're having, are you really sitting with the discomfort in your body, paying attention to the sensations? It is truly life-changing. And when clients with me do this for the first time, it is life-changing for them to understand and to experience deep in their bodies that sitting with something is actually the answer they've been seeking for all along. Thanks so much for being here. I'll see you next time.